Hey everyone, welcome to episode 43 of the Big Fitness Show. Obviously not the Big Tech Show, not even the T4 Show, because I failed at playing the Coast to Coast AM intro music. I was a big fan of that show, Art Bell, Coast to Coast AM. It was one of my goals, Mike, for 2024 to be the host of the Coast to Coast AM show, but I can't even work a soundboard. I don't think I do. Hey everyone, this is a fitness show, by the way, and we're also going to do a book review. We have myself and Big Mike Burns. Sorry about that, Mike.
It's all right, dude. It's all right. To give some context for everybody listening, this is the second take of the intro. We had a technical fail on the beginning. Stevie had a nice surprise for me, but he dropped the ball big time.
I certainly
big
did.
time. Yes, big time. So, but anyway, today's episode is going to be a little bit different than what we've done in the past, as far as talking specifically about fitness and doing things like that. This is definitely in lines with being fit, as far as mentally, physically, healthy, spiritually, all the things, physically fit. The book, Warrior Poet Way, The Warrior Poet Way. This is a review that we're going to do about this book. We both have read the book. I've read it a couple times. Stevie finished it just recently. So we're going to go through this and break this down. And this is something that we think we'll bring some different content and bring a different way of thinking and a different way of looking at stuff, and then doing some book reviews. And we hope to make this a consistent theme. We plan to have another book that we'll talk about at the end of this episode. We can plug the next book so that you guys can read it along with us, and we'll do another review in a month at the end of January and try to do that. So, but for this episode, we're going to talk about The Warrior Poet Way. I'm very excited to hear your thoughts because we haven't talked about it at all. And I just, first off, just loved the book. What do you think first off?
Well, first off, before we even get into that, I want to thank you for giving me the motivation to start to read again. I was getting away from it. I want to thank my wife for buying this for me because she's noticed over the past few months, and then, it's during the spine infection was one thing, but after that, it's like almost really obsessively trying to find what my purpose is in life, what the meaning of what I'm supposed to be on this planet for, what am I meant to do? Because that illness showed me how life is very fragile. Life can be a lot shorter than you're planning on, and you never know, and you want to make the most out of it. So I was kind of floundering around, and you were a part of that. We're trying to guide each other during that time, but I wasn't feeling any kind of direction. I wasn't feeling purpose. And I think number one, for guys like us and people like us, Mike, we feel alone. We talked about it before we even started recording. You were like, we told stories and we were like, wow, it's kind of cool. I don't feel like I'm the only one.
Yeah.
And with what John Lovell, how do you pronounce his name? Lovell or Lovell?
Lovell, I think is how you say it. Yeah.
Lovell. What he produced with this book, number one, was an easy read, which is great if you're getting back into reading, which is exactly where I was. And number two, it gave practices at the end of each chapter, which I think was a big deal. Also, as somebody who potentially may want to write a book someday, and we talked about it here, it's that sweet spot of like giving you a lot of detail, but not being wordy for the sake of being wordy. It's just an overall great book, no matter what. The content is king, but he didn't go on tangents. He also explained things. So whatever he did or however he figured out that sweet spot, good on him, because it's an easy read for 260 some pages. It was not hard to read at all.
Yeah, no, that's good, man. And getting into reading is something that I think is super important. And we've talked about it before. I think where reading, you need to constantly be feeding your mind and reading and do things. So I'm glad that you're getting back into reading and doing some more stuff and finding books like this that just help you up level, right? Like help you become a better person, help you grow. And that's why I read as much as I do. A lot of times I do the audiobooks, but everything that I read is geared towards growing, getting better, a business book of some kind, something like that to help me be better in my profession, better in what I'm doing, be a better man, be a better husband, be a better father. I don't spend a lot of time reading fiction. Some people read a lot of fiction. That's fine. And it's great for creative ideas and things like that. But for me, I'm just always focused on reading something that is going to help me be better. And I think that's where this book is. I think you actually brought up the book to me And then I picked it up and read it real quick and was like, okay, I love this book. And because it's such a way to think about things. And so like the warrior poet, right? When you put those two things together, it's just, they're opposite, a warrior and a poet. And I just loved how in the book it's broken down of what that means. And you want to be a warrior and you want to be a poet. And so like we'll get into it, but it's just really cool to be able to constantly be reading. And I think for everybody listening, that's one thing that we're going to try to show here is that the more you can continue to feed your mind, the more that you can read and the more books that you can do to expand and do different ways of thinking, the better you're going to be and the better your fitness is going to be because of the things that you're doing to up level all the time. And I think that's the whole point behind why we're even having this book review right now, is just as a way to help us be better and help everybody listen and get exposed to different ideas and different things to be better all the time.
Yeah, the mental aspect, and people, they, like you said, they might not, correlate fitness, working out, lifting with the building blocks that you need to have a successful health, fitness, wellness, nutrition, especially nutrition. You need to have a good mindset. But there is mind muscle connection. There is being mentally prepared, emotionally mature to be able to be patient. Because not that the results aren't going to come today or tomorrow, or even maybe next month or next year where you want to go. So it really does tie in line with a lot of stuff. And obviously the warrior part is being physically strong in order to defend yourself, your family, your loved ones. And also I love the fact that the warrior and the poet come together to fight the negative direction the world is going in right now.
Yeah.
And for people that don't think it's going in a negative direction, you can debate it all day long, but you're debating common sense, heart to eyes. It's literally, I'm surprised he kind of, we'll get to the actual structure of how we're going to format the review. But I was like, man, he's coming so close to quoting. He quoted 1984 once in there. He gave a, an analogy to 1984, but so much of what he's talking about is that it correlates with 1984. So if you read this book and read 1984, you'll be in good line for having good perspective. Or you'll be pissed off because you're one of those people.
No, I mean, I think the book it definitely speaks to some negativity that's going on, but how you can be a part of the solution and part of steering the ship in the right direction, right? And I think the book, for those of you who haven't read it, don't know anything about it, The Warrior Poet Way by John Lovell, it's a book that you could easily say is written specifically for men. And I think for a man that wants to be a better man, or a boy that wants to be a better man, or a dude that wants to be a better man, this book is a must read, because it helps give some direction on things. He breaks it down in 10 parts. There's 10 chapters in the book. Each chapter goes over a different category of how to be a better man and and things that you can do. Then there's actual practices, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But one thing I wanted to say too is that if there's any women listening to this, or wives, or that want to help their man be better, that maybe has somebody in their life, if you're a sister, a wife, a daughter, or whatever, reading this book would be good for you as well, because I think it will give you some perspective as to what goes on in your husband's, brother's, father's mind all the time, as far as the struggles that happen, right? Because as a man, there's a lot of pressure for men to perform, to be a certain way. And if they fall short, there's a lot of internal stuff that goes on. And I think for the women in the lives of the men, it's a great book to read, to give that extra added perspective of how you can support, but also, as a father of 3 daughters, what to look for in a man, right? And how to be treated by a man and things like that. And so to me, I think this book is great for everyone. It is definitely written specifically for men to be better men, but I think a woman can benefit from reading this for sure, about understanding men a little bit more, understanding what men should be versus what they are and what you're getting, and the kind of man that you deserve as a woman.
My wife is planning to read this, so
good.
She
good.
She was looking forward to actually me finishing eventually, and and she is going to read it, but it does give you a blueprint on the struggles that
Yeah.
guys. And that's a big thing right now. I've seen that on a lot of ads on TV and stuff like that. The guy saying, I'm fine.
Oh, sure.
But deep
Yeah.
down, most dudes
Yeah.
aren't fine. They're trying to find their way. And that's kind of where this all starts. If we can go to chapter 1 here, we got the contents here. We'll be
Hmm.
better at taking notes. I will too, especially on digital
Sure.
copies. I'll be able to do that. So, chapter 1 is a world in need of warriors. So, we
Hmm.
pretty much tapped into that when I was
Yeah.
talking about how the world is moving in what I feel, what you feel, and definitely what John feels is
Yeah.
the wrong direction right now. Rewriting history, rewriting everything it means to be anything in this
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And, even talks about the 2 + 2 = 4, pisses
Yeah.
people off now and all
Yeah.
this stuff. But yeah, right off the bat, it needs people, men specifically, to stand up. And I think that
Hmm.
was after reading this book, you re examine like, am I living too safely? Am I not living a
Yeah.
warrior life or a warrior poet life? And right off the bat, it has you questioning like your own false contentment. That's what I would
Yeah.
call
Yeah. No, I think with the title of the chapter, "The World in Need of Warriors," is so important right now because just in my interactions with other guys, I feel bad for a lot of them sometimes because they're not living to their fullest potential. And I think that there's a lot of men that are just kind of in this spot in life where they're just kind of complacent and they're not doing the things that they need to do to be better. I'll talk to guys sometimes because and none of this, so hear my heart on this for everybody listening. And none of this is coming from a place of me thinking that I'm better or that I know more or that I'm somehow superior in any way. It's just I've been through it. I've been through a lot. I've had the struggles. I've been through a lot of the things, the self-doubt, still struggle with the self-doubt all the time. I'm married. I've been married for almost 12 years. So I have some experience with that. My wife and I have been through some stuff, and we've come out on the other side in a better way. And so there's just a lot of things that I've learned, and I'm not trying to sit here and preach something that I'm not practicing or I haven't been through. And I think this book really speaks to the importance of men needing to step up. And if you're a guy listening to this right now and you don't feel fulfilled and you don't feel like you have everything you want in life, or you feel like something's missing, I think this book can help you because it sets the tone right from the start of let's take an assessment of where we're at. Like let's figure out where we're at right now and what we need to be and how we need to be better and take a real hard look. And the first chapter kind of spells that out of like, hey, there's not a lot of dudes leading with strength here, and we need some more men to step up. And I'm not just saying on a global scale either, like we have a podcast platform where we can speak to more people, but this is a local thing too. This is in our families.
it.
This is, to me, the importance of men stepping up and leading families is huge. Not to, we can get into the argument, and I'm sure people will say something about the whole man-woman dynamic of the husband leading the family, whatever. No, men should lead the family, and the wife should be right there with leading the family as well. But men need to step up, and there's a lot of men, so many men that I see that aren't doing what they should be doing. And I think this book is a help in the right direction. And that first chapter just really sets the tone of like, hey, there's a couple things in there where I read as I was reading the book, it was like, oh, I know a guy just like that. Oh, I know 10 guys just like that. I know way too many. Oh, I did that for a long time, and I don't do that anymore. And it was just this big, like, all right, wake up, figure out where you need to go. And that first chapter was big for me with that.
Well, they tell women to lead. We lead in different ways. That's what it
Yeah,
is.
sure.
Guys lead a certain way, women lead that way, and especially in a Christian household, that the roles are pretty
Sure.
well defined with that. Doesn't mean you can't bleed over into each other's kind of supposed roles, but the people on the semantics of that. But we need rules and boundaries and
Mm-hmm.
guidelines to do
Totally.
that. And in the warrior part, to me, right off the bat with this first chapter, and then we'll talk about the next one, was you and I are content creators.
Mm-hmm.
We run a business and obviously have to appeal to demographics. But for some reason, it spoke to me on the YouTube side that like I want to be a leader. I don't want to be a follower. I don't want to constantly chase the algorithm. I don't want to chase the
Right.
SEO. Obviously, it would hurt me a little bit, but you know, I'm feeling like I'm the slave to the algorithm, the SEO, the trends, and mostly the negativity and toxicity that draws the most on YouTube. And
Yeah,
that led me to believe, like, saying, screw it, I'm not doing
sure.
that. I don't want to follow. I want to lead with my own thing. And maybe it'll take 10 or 15 or 20 times longer, and maybe it'll never happen, but at least I'm true to myself and I know what I'm putting out there is what I want in the world to leave as a legacy.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, man. And I think the first chapter, I think the gist of it, and to wrap up on the first chapter and move on to the next, is the last thing at the end of every chapter in the book. John Lovell gives you a practice. He calls it a practicum in the book. He even says it's just a fancy way of saying what to do. So at the end of chapter 1, it's get real with yourself. Like, that's the thing that he says. You need to really see where you're at, and have you cultivated this warrior within? Have you spent the time to figure out that there's a warrior inside of you? And if there isn't, how do we get there? Right. And so really taking that step and figuring out what you're going to be fighting for, where you're going to be going, is the thing that you need to do to start all of this out. And I think the book really spells out a great way to get started with that.
I'm going to read the last part of that. Then we'll go to chapter 2. This question should hit everybody who has any desire to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
How would your life change if you summoned the courage to be who you know you should be? It's pretty heavy. That
That's
weight on
powerful.
all these things have weighed on me, but he set up the last question in the practicum at the end of each chapter as the one that sticks with me. I don't know why. They're all important, but those last ones are always the ones that hit me the hardest. All right, chapter 2. People misinterpret this probably. The most dangerous man in the room.
Yeah.
Let's combine it. The most dangerous man in the room is chapter 2, and battle the inner coward, and then we'll kind of combine it with something else, because all three of these go hand in hand. Face death before you die. So 3 things: being the most dangerous man in the room, battling your inner coward, and facing death.
Yeah. All
That's a lot
big
of
things.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And the most dangerous man in the room one, I think people will think, well, like, and Lovell calls it out in the book, talks about how that the word dangerous in a man has a lot of different meanings, and a lot of people attribute different things to being a dangerous man. And I think I feel like the point is, and Jordan Peterson talks about this too, is being dangerous, but knowing how to control it, and getting yourself to the point where you are dangerous enough that you can protect, you can provide, you can do all the things that you need to do when called upon, but you have it in control. And the idea of being the most dangerous man in the room, he talks about it in the book, where it's, you want to be dangerous enough to protect and do all the things that you need to do, but not be so overly overt with it, I guess is the way to say it, so that you're just kind of showing off. You don't want to be peacocking, right? Like, it's be the most dangerous man in a room, but also with the warrior poet mindset, it's okay, I'm dangerous, but you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it, And so then you become someone that is just kind of like a hidden dangerous person, where on the surface, to use myself as an example, on the surface, I'm a cuddly teddy bear. My whole family, they see me, they get to see the real me. I'm this big teddy bear kind of guy that just loves to play and have fun and be silly and goofy. But you piss me off, there's going to be a problem. Right. And so that because of that, I have this exterior that tries to be warming and welcoming, even though I'm the big guy. Some people can misjudge that aspect of it because I'm just a larger dude. But I try to be as warm as possible so that I have this idea. But then when I'm in a room, being the most dangerous man in that room, a lot of times is because I've trained. I've been a pro wrestler, even though it's fake. I still know how to have a fight if needed. Right. And like other trainings that go down and things that I've done over the years to learn to be a little more dangerous, to protect and provide. But it's not walking around pissed off at the world, letting everybody know that I'm the most dangerous man in the room. I think that's the wrong way of being the most dangerous man. And he talks about it in the book. And it really just kind of was like, oh, I need to secretly train to be the most dangerous without letting everybody know that I'm incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, I mean it's practical advice too, because if there is a situation
Yeah,
and you've outwardly demonstrated that you're the person that needs to be taken out first, they're
yeah,
coming for you first. But if you're unassuming, and also it's just one of those things, we've been around wrestlers like Fit Finley and other real tough guys that are
sure,
quiet, and you never,
yeah,
because we can feel it.
yeah,
We can read that, but generally you won't think much of them because they haven't told you. They haven't used that Jedi
right,
mind trick to tell you every second of the day, which
sure,
leads me to the next thing, because no matter how tough you are, dangerous you are, you're always battling fear. You're always battling
mm,
the inner coward
yeah,
that's afraid that you might not be the most dangerous man in the room. You might not be prepared as much. What I got out of that was whatever I'm fearing, I need to quietly, like you said, unassumingly change that and overcome it, and not
hmm
so outwardly show the flaw, but also just battle every fear I ever had about anything. And that's not just fighting, that's just public speaking, that's getting
sure,
out there. And most importantly, I think for him, what I got from it, and tell me what you got, it wasn't so much going to war, it wasn't physical fights, although, it could get to that point. It was more standing for what's wrong in the world, standing up for what you believe is right, and trying to recapture the direction and correct the course that the
yeah,
world's on right now. That's what I got from it. Everybody's
yeah,
afraid to be canceled, and to
yeah,
be marginalized and be called these trigger words that shut everybody down. But
yeah.
sometimes you just got to say screw it that, and whatever. I either, you either die a hero, you live long enough to become the villain, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I definitely got that too. It was the coward part of it. Battling your inner coward is something that I think that we all have to do, and I think they go hand in hand. And I'm glad you lumped them together. And talking about them is being the most dangerous man is really just about training. Really about training, being physically fit, being physically prepared, so that you can hold your own. But then battling that coward is part of it too. Is like getting over this giving you the confidence to battle that inner coward. Like if you do the step of the training, becoming a little more dangerous, we'll use that in quotes, it will help you battle that inner coward because you will be more confident, but then give you the strength to stand up for what's right because you have what's necessary to back it up, right? The worst thing that you can do is try to stand up for yourself in a fight, but have absolutely no physical strength and no training whatsoever, because then you're just going to get your ass kicked, right? So battling that inner coward of standing up for what's right without the training is hard. But if you have the training to back it up and you've made yourself dangerous, you're going to have more confidence to battle that inner coward, stand up for what's right, lead in a good way. And I think the two just go super hand in hand with getting over that cowardness. And then I think he says it there's a line where he talks about, I don't know exactly what it is, so I'm probably misquoting it here, but something about the lines where we all have it in our heads that we're going to rise to the level of the moment. But the reality is we're going to fall to the level of our training. Right. And so most people will not be able to be the superhero, super marksman. And, you're not going to be able to be the guy on the movies that goes and saves the day if you haven't trained to be that guy. And so a lot of us, without even knowing it, will revert back to that inner coward of like, oh God, what do I do? You know what I mean? Because you just haven't trained to be to that point. And so that's another thing with battling that inner coward, I think people can do as well.
Yeah, it's wordier, but I think
Sure.
being the most dangerous man in the room, you kind of understand it, but it's up for interpretation. I would
Sure.
say capable and prepared would be better
Mm,
adjectives. Obviously for the book, it's a warrior thing, so dangerous
yeah.
goes along with it. What I would say too, and this is what I battle, I guess it's part of my inner coward, but I'm trying to be prepared and capable.
Hmm.
Throughout my entire wrestling career, and even now, you try to figure out a million different ways, interactions, conversations. You come across the writer or the agent or Vince, and you're trying to prepare how these conversations will go,
Sure.
so you don't, well, as you say in wrestling, you don't sell it. You don't act surprised or shocked,
Yeah.
taken off guard. That there too. I mean, I will probably look into books in the future. I'm going to start trying to embrace stoicism too,
Mm, sure.
because
Yeah.
my mind works way too much, and I don't just sometimes I don't go with the flow enough. And I'm sort of always trying to maneuver these roads that I'm not quite up to. Does that make
Sure.
sense?
Yeah.
So
Makes
if you
total
do
sense.
this way too much and you're doing this, you can become very obsessive and also paralysis by analysis if you're way too ready all the time, I guess. But you know
Yeah.
what spoke to me here? This is important because this goes along with, I forget which episode we did, but become what you admire. And on the other
Yeah.
flip side of that coin, don't listen to people that aren't living the life you want to live. That's your famous
Yep.
quote.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That I stole from somebody.
Well, he stole it too. It's called
Yeah.
Nick.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good way to do it. Like if you admire people that you admire, train to become like them. That's a good way to figure out, where do I go? What do I start with? You know, the battling or becoming the most dangerous man at the end, the practice, it just says do something physical every day, or not every day, a few days a week, to make sure that you're better. And then he ended it with, train the warrior within, so that when the time of battle comes, he's ready. That's the last thing in that. So it's just preparing yourself, getting prepared for whatever life might throw at you. Probably not going to be a fight all the time, but maybe it's carrying all the groceries in, right? Trying to get them all in one trip, doing that macho thing where you get all the groceries in one trip, training so that you can do that, so you're strong enough to do that. Or maybe it's training so that if your kids are playing and they're running into something dangerous, you're fast enough to get up and go save them from hurting themselves, you know, or you're fast enough to run out and pick up your kid off the ground after they've been hurt, you know. So to me, that's where the training piece is, just being prepared physically for whatever life's gonna throw your way.
Yeah. The other one here, battling your fears. I forget the name of the chapter.
The inner
Sorry.
coward. Yeah.
Battling the inner coward. I like the fact that, because if anybody's looking for direction or they think they don't have enough time in the day, the last part of the paragraph, your mission is to conquer fear and not get a date. Want to start a business? You don't have to quit your job. Just take one step to start a side hustle that can one day become your livelihood. Run at what you're afraid of and watch the fear shrink. Just saying, everybody in these economic times, nobody thinks they have any kind of ability to make any more income or get the income streams, or it's impossible, but it's not. You don't have to go nuclear or quit your job. You can spend, what do I famously say, 18 minutes a day for a year, and you're better than 95% of the people that you're wanting to do what you're wanting to do.
Right. Yep. And that running at what you're afraid of piece is just, it speaks to a bigger thing. Like, and that's in every aspect of life. Run at what you're afraid of. And that usually your biggest gains, your biggest improvements, your biggest leaps in life to be better are just on that other side of fear. And if you can get past that and you can push through that, and I'm preaching to myself right now because I have things that are a block, and fear is the only thing blocking me. And it's pushing past that thing that you fear the most is where you'll get the biggest return and the biggest reward. And I just, said that all to myself. That wasn't for anybody listening. That was right here for me.
You need to tell yourself that all the time. People need to battle the inner coward by talking to yourself and doing that. The last one, I have a little bit of familiarity with: face death before you die.
Yeah, a little bit.
I don't think enough people, I think people are too comfortable. He says it in the book. People are too comfortable. Things are way too easy in a way. They're about to get harder if you don't notice the way the world's going. But the Tim McGraw song, Live Like You Were Dying, Tug McGraw's son. Tug McGraw started dying, and then they did all this stuff that they never got a chance to do. And this was a guy that pitched in the World Series. And even with that, he had to live his last time on this earth making up for all the stuff he never got to do. Right. So that song, if you haven't ever heard that song, man, where you been?
Yeah, right.
Great song.
Yeah, Lovell talks about it in the book where he just quotes some of the lines, like "Live like you were dying." It's a great way to live your life. Live every day like you're dying, like you're not gonna have it. And it's a great way to stay in the moment, live for the moment, live in the moment, something like that, just as a mantra to go through life so that you're doing the things that you need to do so that you're living and not having regrets, right? If you have regrets, make up for them now. And in the book, Lovell is a military guy. He was a ranger, so special operations ranger. I don't know the official title, what he was, but he talks about before they would go out on deployments, they would have to write a death letter. And it was based, and this, when he was reading it, I was listening to the audiobook, and it is every time I've listened to the audiobook at least 4 times, and every time it made me start crying, because he talks about in the death letter, what you're doing is you're writing your last words to the people you love and people you care about. And so in my head, I'm thinking about, man, what would I say to my wife? What would I say to my girls? And what would that letter be on how, like, what's the last things that I would want to say? And it really hit, like, I want to start crying right now. But it really hit as it's the weight of that. And what's important, who do I need to write to in that letter? Who are the people? And I think the practice at the end is write your death letter, and it really helps put in perspective. I haven't done it yet because I'm struggling. But it puts in perspective what's important and what matters. If you're not going to put somebody on that list of people you need to write to in your death letter, investing in what they think and investing time and with them now, is it that important? You know, you're not going to talk about things that are minuscule, that don't matter. You know, if you leave them out of your death letter, then they probably aren't as important to your life right now. Or if there's somebody you forgot and that you want to foster that relationship so that they would be included in your death letter, then you need to fix that and start to work on that. Or if you struggle with what to say, if you struggle with how to go through it, I mean, there's definitely some hard stuff. I'm going to try to do it, but it will be a soaked in tears. That's for damn sure.
Well, I mean, if for nothing else, what you just said is you tend to figure out who the important people in your life are, and then who the people who you shouldn't listen to. You said be who you admire.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a good way to self-assess the garbage that's around you in your life that you don't need, the people that are dragging you down, and they're not really that important if they're not included in the letter. But yeah, I mean, the death letter thing is just something that I thought about it when I was really, really, really sick. It wasn't just a will. It was like, what am I going to say? Because I don't know how far this thing's going to go. I mean, I didn't know how quick it was, or there was a point there where I was like, I got to say everything I need to say. I got to get right with God. I got to get right with my family. I got to do all that stuff. And being laid up in a bed and not be able to move, you're motivated, but you have no real action you can physically take with it. So yeah, that hit me pretty hard. And I suppose the audiobook brings out the emotion where the written word doesn't really capture that.
Yeah, it definitely did. And I read it. I've listened to it 3 times, just listening to it, but then I read it one time, reading the book and listening. And when this last time that I read it, while I was reading it and listening to it, I definitely, like every other time, I got watery eyes and was about to cry. This time I definitely cried for sure, because it's just emotional, you know. Like, you think about it, what would you say to your wife if you knew you were going to die? What would be the last thing? Like, how do you even start and begin? And it just, you know, like, it's a practice to help you get right with, like you just said, get right with everything in your life, so that you feel like you can, when you go, people know what you felt, what you meant, what you know, what really mattered to you, and how they matter to you. And man, it just, it's a heavy thing to think about, but it's not a bad thing to think through. And I think it would help you live like you're dying more if you knew what really mattered when writing that letter.
Yeah, that's what motivated me to really reassess again and go, what kind of legacy am I going to live, and how am I going to make every minute count? And did I wasted today or yesterday. I just didn't feel good. I didn't feel energetic. I didn't feel productive, but I was trying to fight it because of that line. Like, okay, like, if that's my last day, all I did was sit around and watch YouTube videos. But you have to have days like that. You're not going to be able to do that. By the way, I was going to say too that as far as this, I forget. I already forgot.
Mm.
All right, let's go to the next chapter. War of Ideas.
Yeah.
This one I don't quite remember, except I think it obviously touched on the things we talked in the beginning about these warring ideas in the world and the
Hmm.
world going in a completely crappy direction, the wrong direction. And we need to
Yeah.
really get back to the more of the traditional ways. Am I reading this or is that another chapter?
No, yeah. He definitely talked about that. Talks about philosophy and philosophers and college professors on philosophy
Oh,
teaching
that's right.
things. And
Weaponizing philosophy and being activist
yeah,
instead of teaching
yeah,
people to think.
yeah, and tearing apart truths, and so that you go to college and you have an idea of what truth is, but then they totally deconstruct it by the end of college. You have no idea what truth even means, and so then truth becomes your truth, and then nothing matters anymore. To we were talked about the 2 + 2 = 5, right? You can make somebody believe that that's what that is, and the reality is just not. This is not what it is, and so he talked about the bedrock of truth, and this book for people listening is a very biblical book as well, right? Like he's rooted in faith. He's a very strong Christian. He's a follower of Jesus, and so that's the truth. That is the truth that he bases everything else on. And so he talks about in this book finding the truth and finding the truth so that you have an actual framework to work from. Because if you don't know what truth is, then you can. Yeah, he uses an example in here of morally justifying whatever you want if there's no bedrock of truth. There's no bedrock of saying that things are morally wrong if it's totally open to interpretation. So then you can morally justify murder if you figured it out in your head that way, right? If there was no baseline of truth to work from. And so that was kind of some of the topic that he talks about in here, but it's getting us to think about and read and learn what the truth is. And at the end of it, he talks about, it says, just read a book. That's the practice at the end, is pick up a book and read it. It says bonus points if it's the Bible, but pick up the book and read and grow. And like we talked about at the beginning of this, is constantly feeding your mind so that you're learning and growing and getting on the ideas and being able to have educated conversation on different ideas that get thrown at you, so that when somebody tries to say that 2 + 2 = 5, you can argue against that because you know the truth that 2 + 2 = 4, right? So it's one of those things that's what in this book he talks about, or in this chapter he talks about figuring out these ideas and being someone who understands and learns about different things so that you can contribute positively to the conversation.
Yeah, I think that chapter definitely has enrollment in trade schools elevated after somebody reads that. Not going to send your kids to college. Um, now that being said,
Yeah,
there is this is where these people get twisted and off to literally the left turn in the fork in the road.
sure.
But what happens is I'm looking at too, there's a lot of history and a lot of things throughout history that we haven't been told the full story on. There's a lot of
Sure.
things that the government hasn't told us. There's a lot of secrets. There's a lot of, when were the pyramids built? When did civilization start? When was this story or that story? There's so many things hidden. So I understand the premise that we still need to look for the evolving of information, the evolving of learning things that the way
Mhm.
they really happened. But this base knowledge or the 2 + 2 thing and all this other stuff and the things John talks about in his book, it's completely perverted and bastardized.
Mhm.
It's just rethinking stuff for the sake of rethinking stuff. It's mental gymnastics.
Mhm.
And that's where you lose guys like us. Sure, I can look back and you can be like, when did the pyramids really get built?
Sure.
Who built them? What happened? Is this real? Is this not real? Those are those are being critical thinkers,
Mhm.
not just for the sake of saying math is racist and that's the end of it. Come on.
Yeah. 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 No, that's true. That's true, man. And I was just looking through
It's
the
okay. I said
chapter.
it. You didn't. I know you were saying, okay, he said it. I didn't.
What? I would have said it too, man. It's
We were
all
trying
good.
to figure out who said it first. Who's going to say it first?
No, I would have said it too. But in the chapter, there's a couple headlines that he calls out in the book. Arm yourself with information. And I think that's something that speaks to this war of ideas. You got to arm yourself with information to be able to know what's right, what's not right, and things like that. But then also the next headline is make war with ignorance. You don't want to be completely in the like, if you are ignorant to an idea, learn about that idea. Try to learn about it. If other people are ignorant to certain ideas, people in your life that are ignorant to certain ideas, help them learn, help them understand, so that we can have better conversations, so that we can find actual truth in life and move the needle forward in everything that we do.
I can't wait for the emails at thebigfitnessshow@gmail.com.
Yeah, bring them. Bring them.
I will
I'm all
venture a
for
guess.
it.
Thought you guys were good.
We are good.
Guess I was wrong. I was wrong.
Hey, that's fine. You can just turn the podcast off if you have a problem with it.
When you were trying
anyway,
to 2+2 is the first place you were wrong.
Yeah, no, it's true. That's true. So, all right, next chapter is Every Warrior Needs a Muse, chapter 6.
Certainly. Yeah.
That's true. That's very true.
We wouldn't be anywhere without our wives. That's absolutely 1,000% correct. We can go on and make an entire series of episodes about that.
Yeah.
She's definitely, I would not be the man I am today, and I'm still not the man I want to be for her.
Yeah.
Nowhere close.
Yeah.
For the short amount of time we've been together, less than a decade.
Sure.
She's completely changed who I am all for the better.
Yeah.
All for the better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say the same about my wife. Like she has become, and I'll be honest, she was not my muse. I loved her. And I love her. I love her. And it was, but at the beginning, I didn't treat her like she was my only muse, and it made for a rocky beginning of our marriage. And it was tough. We had that beginning part, but it got to the point where life and the pressures of life and whatever, I let other things become my interests. I was poured more into my work. I was poured more into trying to build a business and trying to wrestle. And I was more focused on those things than I was on her. And then when I truly made her my undoubtedly muse, that no questions asked, the number one priority in my life, life got so much better, because now I live for her. I live for making her happy, making her life better, protecting her, providing for her, all the things that I want to do. Not that she can't do it for herself, because she's perfectly capable of doing stuff for herself, but she is the reason that I want to be better. Her and the girl and my daughters is the reason that I want to be better. And so in the book, it was interesting. In the chapters, he talks about false muses and things like that when you're younger, a lot of young men get excited about this idea of chasing women. And he gets this idea, and earlier in my dating life, before I met my wife, I just wanted to chase as many women as I could and live in the life of a young pro wrestler that's in shape and single, like you just want to chase women. And that's just not, you're trying to find a different muse everywhere. And it's not fulfilling. And it's not something that is the right way to go about it. And so I look back on that period of my life and I'm just like, oh man, I don't feel good about that. And in the book, he talks about teenage boys and into late teens, early adulthood, 20s, guys, they chase the wrong things, and they're not looking in the right places for the right things, because you're looking for this muse. But when this one doesn't meet all the expectations, you jump to this one, or then you jump to drugs, or then you jump to alcohol. You jump to, like, you play video games because you want to be the hero and you failed in this part of your life. So video game, you can be the hero. And there's all these things that you chase the wrong thing. And when you find the right muse, it's just so much different and better. And that's where our wives have totally changed who we are as men for the better. And that's what he talks about in the book, is finding your muse so that you have something to live for, a mission to focus on, and to protect and provide, and all the things. So
Yeah, I
went
couldn't
on
agree
tangent.
more. Oh, it's okay. We can go off on tangents. All that's why I said
Yeah.
we'll do a series of episodes about that. I'll tell you what, dude. I never thought the time would ever come in my life that wrestling and things around the business would not be number one. No, nowhere
Sure.
close to number one.
Sure.
And that obsession carried over into the business and then into my marriage.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now I can't even imagine. Like, it's hard for me. I don't leave home base because this, going on the road and spending 2 days away from my wife is one of the most nauseating like scenarios now. Like, I don't want to. I mean,
Sure.
besides my business and the stuff I'm running, I just don't want to be away from her. And I am so glad that I waited 44 years to get married or even meet her and then
Sure.
eventually get married, because I can't imagine being a full-time wrestler and
Sure.
marriage and kids, and because you're going to neglect something and it's going to be the wife and kids because you need to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad I didn't do that. And there's so many guys and girls now that double down and embrace that lifestyle and they let everything fall apart in their
Sure.
personal life.
Sure.
You're
Yeah.
eventually going to get released and you're eventually going to have to go home.
Yeah.
We
Sure.
all do.
Yeah. And, and I think for both of us, it's a marriage thing, and we've found our muses in our wives. But I think if you're not married, if you don't have a girlfriend or boyfriend, like, you can find muses in different areas and different things that you're working for. It doesn't just have to be a spouse or significant other. It can be any number of things that you're working to be better for. And your muse can be your own thing. Like, for a time our muse was wrestling. We wanted to be better wrestlers. And then that was the thing that mattered the most to us. And so we put all of our energy and effort into that. And there's muses can shift, but finding one that you can actually like work towards and take some time and really think about. And that's what he says at the end of the chapter. What inspires you? What are your muses? Think about what things make you want to be a better person. If it's your kids, if it's your spouse, if it's your parents that make you want to be better, if it's, somebody that you admire. We talked about it a little bit ago. Be like, to work to be like someone you admire. Maybe that's your muse for the time being, so that you can just up level and make yourself better. It's just taking the time to really think about what that is, so that and you can make steps in that direction.
Well, speaking of steps, I don't think we'll spend too much time on learning to dance.
Yeah.
Might want to skip that, but it's another example about doing hard things, and
Sure.
and it gave me a good message to try to be more attentive to my wife and
Sure.
areas or at least look at it. Am I being attentive enough? And even asking her, I do ask her, like, are you okay? Are you getting everything you need from me? And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think this next chapter, because they're raising little poets and children, I'm gonna let you speak on that and how to stay free. We'll finish, but I really think the chapter, they all spoke to me, but the chapter that really spoke to me and put things in perspective was this one: goodness, not greatness.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to be great, and the analogy of talking about our supposed great men in our society, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, you can put Trump, you can put anybody who you consider to be a great person,
Yeah.
but wasn't necessarily a good man or a good person, a good woman.
Right.
And that really spoke to me, that I would rather be known for being a good man than a great anything.
Right. Right. Because and I think the analogy he uses in the book is there's a level of ruthlessness that you have to be great. And do you always treat people the right way? And to use Steve Jobs, famously, he was an a-hole, famously, like, he treated people terribly to get where he wanted to go. But people look at him with rose-colored glasses as a great man for accomplishing the things that he did. And don't get me wrong, he did achieve a level of greatness as far as his impact in the world and what he did. But the way he went about getting there, was he always a good man in the process? And I think that for both of us, just knowing your heart and knowing mine, we want to be good men that do things the right way, that treat people the right way. And if that means we don't achieve this top level of greatness, so be it. You know, I don't think that we're willing to sacrifice. We both want to be great, but we want to be great in the goodness aspect of it, if that makes sense.
Well, because
Yeah.
I think it boils down to, if you want to talk, since his stuff is based biblically as well, you
Yeah.
know, we know we're in the world, but we don't want to be of the world. And
Right.
they were very much of the world. And the other thing is, like, I always thought that kind of thing, like Steve Jobs, the way he treated people and the way, or even like Elon Musk, and there's Tim Cook famously, like, said, okay, I need for you to go to China and blah, blah, blah. And then the person sitting there in the meeting is like, what are you waiting for? Get the F out of here. And it's like, is that really, to me, that shows weakness, not strength.
Sure.
That you can't motivate people except to trick them and use you know, like magic tricks and intimidation and all this other bullshit. I'm sorry. That's the sign of even Vince to a certain degree in WWE.
Sure.
You have to have the boys in a way, you know, wrestlers. We see with AEW, Tony Khan, just to give a little wrestling analogy. Tony Khan is probably a great guy. Tony Khan is probably a super generous, nice guy. The boys are turning him upside down and shaking his pockets empty right now and taking advantage of him.
Sure.
So in that aspect, and even in football, there has to be a healthy respect, but also maybe a healthy fear in order to create those boundaries. But you don't manipulate people and you don't use people. And I can go on and on about these supposed great men. There's you know, you read all the self-help books and watch the lectures. This Dan Pena guy, you ever see this dude?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about.
The one that London Real. Brian Rose models himself after, dresses those suits. Every other word is the F word, the C word, the B word, the P word, and that's the way he's. You know, and people pay really a lot of money to. It's almost like you're paying to be roasted.
Oh,
like,
sure.
I mean, those people are just. Sure. I feel bad for them because they don't get it. They're not happy people. I don't believe Steve Jobs died a happy man. I don't believe that any of these people are going to be satisfied with what they have. But that whole Gary V hustle, grind, and whatever.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Yeah, no, I get you, man. Like
most of them are full of shit anyway. I'm sorry, they are.
Sure. No, that's fair. I will give you that. There's a lot of people on the internet that are full of shit. I think Gary V he's not full of shit. He definitely brings some value, but he definitely works his ass off.
I'm talking about the blueprint for these guys. That's the Gary V one.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, you know, like I think this chapter of the book, the goodness and not greatness, is he ends it with the practice of finding your top 10 priorities and what are you focusing on, and really focusing on being good in those aspects and making being good one of your top priorities. To me is important, is being kind, you know, like finding that mission for yourself of this is how I live my life. And that's what makes the most sense. And it's finding those type of priorities, list them out what you think they are, but then take an evaluation of, are they really? You know, he uses the example of people that will say that God is their top priority, but they won't spend any time praying every day, or they'll only spend a minute or two praying every day while they spend the rest of the day focused on a million other things that actually are their top priorities, you know? And so it's just really evaluating what your top 10 priorities are. And I think he does a good job of making you think about that in this chapter.
Yeah. That paragraph in the practicum, where I was like, I think we talked about it. We do our devotional in the morning or one at night.
Sure.
But man, we both got to work on the in-between stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So the next chapter.
That's the real work that's going to bear fruit in the end.
Totally. Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Next chapter is all you.
But then having like that is the real work. I think you're right, and that's the real work that's going to lead to progression. But you got to do the real work at figuring out what they are, and then do they line up with what you want them to be from a priority perspective. I think that's huge. So yeah. Next chapter 9, Raise Little Poets, and just the dance. The chapter 7, we didn't talk about it, but learning to dance. I think it's just speaking to the softer side of being a poet, learning different things, and really trying to learn a different way of going about it. And dancing's just different, being vulnerable, letting yourself be vulnerable. Cause a lot of times guys, they're too macho to dance and whatever. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. The Raising Little Poets, number 9. This is for people with kids, or if you're going to have kids, if you're not going to have kids. But I think this speaks to a bigger picture, not just with kids. If you have your own kids, I think it's a bigger thing with, you've heard it takes a village to raise a child. Like, it's my kid, but the interactions with the other people in their lives are important, and they're going to be impactful. Like, some of my most impactful things as a kid were the coaches that I had. I remember I had Coach Ken Wilcox, and he was my coach for basketball as a kid. And he's somebody that I still hold in high regard because of the impact he had on my life as a kid. And I think this can be a chapter to where, if you have kids, definitely speaks to raising them to know the truth, raising them to be little poets, raising them to, if you have sons, to be warriors, and even your daughters, my daughters, to be warriors, and to have the both aspects of the warrior and the poet, and raising kids the right way, not just letting a device raise your kid, not letting your public school raise your kid, not letting the nanny raise your kid. It's making it, I guess the goal here for me with this is, or not the goal, I think the goal with the chapter was to convey that you need to have an active role in your child's life. One of the things he talks about in here, and something that I've adopted after reading it for the first time, is he has 2 boys. He talks about how he reads to his boys every night, and he'll just sit down and read, and the kids will want to sit and read with him. I started doing that with my daughters, and I just love it. I'll read a couple chapters of a book, and it's just so much fun to get them to sit and do it. It took a little bit to get into the habit, but now it's something that we do. Last couple of days we haven't, because of Christmas and parties and things like that, but we do it almost every night. And I sit down and read a couple chapters of a book, try to do, voices for the characters and things. And it's just a lot of fun to be intentional with my kids. But I think this translates to people who don't have kids. When you're interacting with your friends' kids, or if you're helping out or volunteering at a school, or whatever you're doing, if you have any type of interaction with kids, always be aware of the message you're sending them, because more is caught than taught. You can stand on a pulpit and preach all day long, but if the kid's seeing you being a turd, they're going to be turds too. If you're living life in a righteous way, and you're being a good human being, and you're being nice, your kids are going to pick that up, and encouraging those behaviors. One of the things that I try to do as much as I can, and this is a little pro tip for parents, when I see my kids do wrong things or make bad choices, obviously I correct them, and I try to help them see the right choice. But when I see my kids do the right thing, I'm over the top with how proud and I genuinely am, but I make them know that right decision was awesome. And I'm so proud of them for what they did, and they made the right decision. Like, when my oldest daughter will share with her younger sisters, and she did it the other day without even me telling her, without even anything. And she did it, and I saw it, and I was so excited. I was so happy that she did that, because it was that positive reinforcement for that behavior, so that she can do it again. And I think that's what this chapter is about, is just being intentional, knowing what's going on with your kids, and focusing more time and energy on your kids than you are anything else. And I'm going to go on a tangent for just a second. Sorry, I have to. It just popped in my head.
Okay.
As men and as fathers, we get excited about other things. And this goes back to the chapter of the muses and finding different muses and things. I see a lot of issues, and a lot of times where guys get more interested in what their fantasy baseball team is doing than what their kids are doing. If I asked you right now, if you're listening to this and you have kids, if I asked you right now, what are your kids doing in school? Would you know the answer? But then if I asked you, how did so-and-so baseball player do on Sunday? Would you know the answer? Baseball's not in season right now, but you get my point. If you know more about your football teams, if you know more about your best baseball teams, if you know more about your favorite basketball team than you do what's going on in your kids' lives, you're doing something wrong. You need to fix it. Sorry. As a father, you need to make a change and know more about what's going on in your kids' lives, your wife's life, than you do what's going on your fantasy baseball team. I'm not saying don't do fantasy baseball, although I think you don't have time for that. If you got wife and kids, spend that time being intentional with them. but you shouldn't know more about all the other things than you do with what's going on with your kids. And I think in this chapter of Raising Little Poets, I think that's what it's about, is leading by example, and really focusing in on your kids, and being a good dad or being a good mom to your kids. So that was my tangent.
No, it's a great tangent. Great tangent.
Yeah.
Also homeschool whenever you can. That's probably the best way to raise them.
I mean, yeah, there is a lot of that's, you know, to me, that's something that I feel like I would do it if our careers were in a little different position and we had the time to be able to do it. Fortunately, we're in a school district where I feel pretty good about the environment that my kids are learning in. You know, we specifically moved to where we moved because of the values that are important in the town that we live in. And I feel like the school district is just reinforcing those values. And it's one of my kids' teachers lives down the street. And so I know the teacher personally, and I can really feel good about that. So but the homeschooling, yeah, it definitely crosses my mind a lot. So anyway, moving on. Next chapter. The last chapter, how to stay free.
How to stay free. Good Lord. This could be a whole episode on its own.
Well, yeah, it could. It really could. But I really liked it because it was literally like, if you want practical things to do, this is a practical chapter. It tells you do these things to help yourself stay free. It gets kind of a little bit into that prepper mindset and being prepared a little bit, which is not a bad thing. It's not bad. And it's definitely something that I think you can benefit from, just figuring out how to stay free in your life, and encompassing all of the things that you learn in the book to actually put it into practice now.
Yeah, this makes me, I mean, we've talked off camera a bunch of times. You do some great stuff for, canning and prepping food and preserving food. And I want to have a homestead too, where we can do all that, rely as little as possible, because for people to think that we get power outages multiple times here, even if it just rains or whatever, the grid and everything else, the systems are all hanging on by a thread. So we're looking at this and saying water, electricity, food, all this stuff. Are we really roughing it if we set up the foundation and the workflow to get these preparation type things down? We're doing nothing but saving money too. So if you are being more self-reliant, more self-sufficient, you don't have to go to the grocery store. Inflation isn't going to hit you anywhere near as hard as someone who has to rely on this stuff. And you're more mindful about where your energy comes from. You're more mindful about food and how to make sure you can stretch it out. You have to ration your food maybe a little bit, but
sure,
I've seen lots of people's gardens, including yours. There's so much food. You're not rationing anything. You're rationing when you go to Publix. You're rationing because $100 is not getting you anything anymore. So
right.
I think, in a way, economically, being free is actually going to be more of a better financial future than relying on the system. And with the electricity going out, the water is dirty, all this stuff and that. Are you really better off not supposedly roughing it off grid? That's where I'm leaning towards right now.
Sure. Well, I think taking an assessment of where are all the areas that you rely on something else. Like, if you couldn't go to Walmart today, do you have enough food? I live in the Midwest and I live in Northern Illinois. And so it started snowing this morning. So what if this is a blizzard? Do I have enough food in the house to get me through the next couple of days? If for some reason I can't go to the store and I can't go get what I need to get, right? Like, or if another pandemic comes around and all the stuff goes away, do you have enough to survive? Not that it's life. I mean, it could be life or death, but do you have enough to get through a couple days to not have to rush out to the store or risk going out in a blizzard or whatever? Are you prepared for it? And I think it's just taking stock of, where am I most vulnerable in my day-to-day life, as far as things that I need to have on hand. Do I have enough food to provide for my family? Are you able to produce your own food? Maybe you're not, but how can you figure out a way to have food stored on hand so that you can get food and not be reliant on a different, what's the word I want to say? It's reliant on someone else to provide for yourself. You know, there is a certain level of resiliency that we have to have.
Well,
But I
relying on
think
a system that wants to control you through that need.
there you go. There you go. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, relying on the systems. And what systems in my life am I most reliant on, and how can I make myself self-reliant? And looking at different things of starting a garden. That was one of my best memories of the summer, was having a garden and growing food. And I've got a pantry full of canned food that will last me year to 2 years, and I can feed my family if I need to. I think right now, conservatively, we could survive 2 months without going to the grocery store, period, because we have that much food in our house to take care of and feed and eat. We might have to eat the same thing, but we've definitely got enough food to last a couple months. And I'm working to make that longer too. You know, it's just being more resilient and making sure that I'm providing for my family. And that's what this final chapter talks about, is addressing where you're at and what systems you rely on, and then how to make yourself less reliant on those systems.
Definitely working on it. These land prices need to come down, though. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, right.
Well, all in all, I want to thank you once again, and thank my wife for getting me back into reading. She picked up the Tim Tebow book for me out of like Hobby Lobby or something. It was like $3. So the
Nice.
Mission Possible.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It was like $3. And so if you got a Hobby Lobby anywhere near you or whatever, or maybe on Kindle, it'll be on sale.
Yeah.
So I started reading that, and we're going to give them a preview. Everybody, right now, we want you to be a part of this. So we know we kind of sprung this book review on you, but from this point on, every month, there's going to be an episode where we review a book. What's going to be the book coming up? So basically, we're recording this episode at the end of December. So you have until the end of January to read. Send us an email, thebigfitnessshow@gmail.com. Leave us a voicemail through Spotify, and tell everybody what book you're showing right here, Mike.
The next book that we're going to read is Choose Your Enemies Wisely by Patrick Bet-David. It's kind of a planning your year, picking your enemies, picking for goals. This is part of like the business books and business mindset that I focus on with new books that I read. Helps just for planning. The subtitle says Business Planning for the Audacious Few. So if you're really just trying to up-level your business, it's a different mindset of choosing your enemies. It'll be a good book to read through and try to up level where we're at and where you're at and what you're trying to do moving forward in 2024. So
let's talk about the AEW fan base and that.
No, it doesn't. The audacious few, not the whatever.
Well, I meant the enemies. They seem to still be my enemy for some reason.
So final thoughts on this book, The Warrior Poet Way. I really think if you're a guy and you're looking for some direction, or if you're a guy that has some direction but wants to up level that, this is a must read. I really think that this would be a good positive influence on the future of your life and really help you take stock on where you're going in the future. And I definitely recommend reading this book. A little pro tip on how I read it is I buy the physical book and the audiobook, and I'll listen and read at the same time. And when I listen, because you can read a little bit faster than they speak on the audio. I do the 2x speed when I listen to it, and I can listen to it and it jives with how I'm reading. And so then it goes really well for me when I read it. So definitely check this out. What's your final thoughts on the book?
Same thing. This was the best primer book, I would say, to get me back into reading. Now I'm going to definitely make it part of my day, every day, probably multiple times a day. I'm going to read the Bible. That's the most important book that I want to read. So we have to get back to doing that. And what I was going to say was the reason why it's going to break bad habits is because I tend to sit there and go, well, I'll watch YouTube videos and I'll learn off of that. Or and you space out watching YouTube videos. You fall asleep, you doze off, you're distracted, you pick the phone up. When I'm reading, I don't, outside of the screenshots I share with you and a few other guys with the devotionals, when I'm picking up a book, this goes on the charger and the phone's nowhere near me. So that's what I would say. Getting back into reading should open up a lot more of my pathways to thinking in general and being more efficient and more organized. And of course, this type of book is going to give me hopefully the constant direction. I'm probably going to end up reading it again.
Yeah.
And when I feel lost and kind of going through it again. So it's a great
That's
book,
awesome.
whether it's your first book again, like me reading again, or you're on a path to do that. It's definitely going to fit into your regimen.
Love it. That's awesome.
That's it.
Cool. All right. Well, that's it for this episode of the Big Fitness Show. Review of the Warrior Poet Way. Next, I don't know if we have a plan for next week, but we'll be back for episode 44. We're coming up on a whole year of us doing this, so this is exciting. But for myself, for Big Stevie Cool,
200 pounds this morning.
Ooh, you really are Big Stevie Cool. I love it.
I'm about to go have Subway with my wife, so I should be 205 by the end of that.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. Awesome. Well, hey, as always, email us, let us know some feedback, comment, email us at thebigfitnessshow@gmail.com. And if you got some value from this episode, share it with somebody so they can get some value from it too. And for myself and Big Stevie Cool, we will see you in the next episode. Thanks, everybody.